I use Backloggd extensively as a sort of memory aid for my video game opinions. Even just the numerical score is oftentimes enough to make me remember some semblance of what I feel about a game, but most importantly it functions as a list of things I know which I can look at if I am looking for something specific. The site does events every once in a while, like today's 1998 replay event. It's a retro variant of its Game of the Year series, where you look at the games of one year and pick your favorites according to some categories. These categories are a bit generic and I feel missed the opportunity for more gameplay focused categories, but it's fun to participate regardless. Let's take a look at some of the more notable games from this year. I feel like a lot of the lists you will see in this event are going to be dominated by 5 games I can immediately see at the top of Backloggd's popularity chart. First of all, The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, which is the average terminally online millennial's favorite game of all time, will very likely take the overall Game of the Year spot, and probably also most other categories. However, for those that aren't much of a fan of Nintendo or simply prefer different kinds of games, there are a bunch more heavy hitters here. Half-Life and Metal Gear Solid are both pioneers of their genres and today hailed as absolute classics by many. While not generally talked about in the same breath, there's the same sort of reverence for both of these games that props them up as milestones everything released after is compared to. I can see either easily getting the narrative category and Metal Gear Solid taking the music category, while I think there's a chance for Half-Life in the gameplay category. There are also some heavy-hitting platformer favorites for a lot of people here. Banjo-Kazooie is another one of those games you just couldn't escape on the internet around the start of the last decade. Another incredibly beloved game in the past, though that has slightly waned over the last few years. A game that seems to slowly be overcoming its mixed reputation, however, is Sonic Adventure, which I can see sweeping the categories for a certain niche of people. Another game with gameplay that fans will tell you is incredibly tight, and a great soundtrack, flashier than the ones we've talked about so far. The best multiplayer category is a little bit more of a wash than the others. I can see a lot of people immediately going for Mario Party 1, but the year also has games like StarCraft, also a strong contender for gameplay and soundtrack, Metal Slug 2, which is probably one of the best looking games of the year and probably has some of the most popular co-op, F-Zero, another game which I can easily see winning a few soundtracks, and a bunch of fighting games including Tekken 3, a Marvel vs. Capcom game, a Street Fighter game, Guilty Gear, Soul Calibur, and so on. Half-Life and StarCraft aside, I have mostly been focusing on console games so far, but for a lot of PC gamers this year also had some real heavy hitters that might take it away. Fallout 2 and Baldur's Gate are giants in the space of PC RPGs that are still hailed as the peaks of their genres in some circles today. There's a certain type of person for whom Looking Glass Studios games are the peak of human achievement, and Thief the Dark Project marks the start of the studio's most beloved period, which lasts until its closure just about 2 years later. There are so many more games I could go over, but I think I'll leave it at that. 1998 is an incredibly stacked year from a lot of perspectives. However, my list is barely strong enough to feel good about. There are some real heavy hitters in there for me too, but since my tastes skew in a few specific directions, they would all kinda take up the same categories. But in the end, I did come up with some choices. Multiplayer was the hardest category for me to choose since I barely play any multiplayer games, so it usually comes down to a racing game. In this case I'm gonna go with F-Zero X, an incredibly fun game for the N64 which, remarkably for its time, doesn't lose anything in split-screen multiplayer. The feeling of speed in this game is very much unmatched in this generation of consoles. Now, soundtrack was hard in a different way, in that there are so many to choose from. F-Zero X was also under consideration, but in the end I decided to go for R4 Ridge Racer Type 4. A PS1 racing game this time, but it couldn't be more different from F-Zero. It's all very cool and stylish, and the soundtrack practically embodies this platonic ideal of a Japanese PS1 game soundtrack, up there with Ape Escape. I recommend a listen through this soundtrack to anyone, and while you're at it, play the game too, it's a lot of fun. One of the most divisive categories in the age of early 3D graphics is definitely going to be visuals. Different people just want different things here, and some might even leave this category empty as some sort of statement. That's not me though, for me this was easy. Crash Bandicoot Warped is a game with so much color, character and just fun pouring out of every polygon that it would be impossible not to pick. There are games with higher polygon counts and some really nice pixel art on Dreamcast and PC from this year, but I'm all going in on possibly the best looking game on PlayStation. Narrative was by far the easiest category, with really only one possible choice. Metal Gear Solid. It's not the deepest story ever, nor does it hold up under whatever scrutiny you want to tear it apart under, but it's an undeniably fun adventure with so many memorable moments, fun characters and insane cutscene direction for the PlayStation 1. Kojima's breakout hit is also my favorite game in the series by some margin. I'm just not much of a fan of actually having to do stealth. Best gameplay is such a strange metric. Throwing everything from platforming movement over exploration to puzzle design into the exact same category makes this the hardest one to determine for me. After some deliberation and breaking the tie with Crash 3 so I can talk about different games for each category, I went for Sonic Adventure. This is a relatively new one for me, but I've learned to like this game's janky physics. The movement for most of the characters is a whole lot of fun if you know how to wrangle the physics into place. There are some things I really don't like about this game, but shitty gimmicks and a bad first impression aren't enough to ruin this one for me. Which brings me to my personal favorite game of 1998. Which of the games I have mentioned so far do you think I will choose? Well, it's none of them, because in most categories, just hiding behind first and second place, there is always Spyro the Dragon. If you were to ask me what my favorite game development studio from 1998 to about 2007 is, I would be suspicious that you might already know my answer is going to be Insomniac Games. The first 3 Spyro games to me are an example of how to make non-challenging games fun by pure strength of creativity. The visuals, music and game feel in this game may not be quite as strong as they are in the sequels, but it makes up for it with more interesting levels gameplay-wise. I don't give a lot of 10s and neither is this game. Spyro just drifts too much to make it happen, but there's no doubt in my mind that Spyro the Dragon is my favorite game of 1998. Which are your favorites from this year? I honestly think with how many genres had tentpole releases this year that most people's lists are going to look quite different. With a large enough sample size, I still expect Ocarina of Time to take the lead, but hey, maybe there'll be an upset.